November 19, 1688, Salisbury Plain, England. King James II of England stood in the bitter wind. His crown still rested upon his head, yet his kingdom was slipping away from him. Months earlier, William of Orange, the Protestant ruler of the Dutch Republic, had landed in England with an army. Noblemen and soldiers who once swore loyalty to James began to defect to William. The reason was simple: they feared this Catholic king threatened England's Protestant traditions. James knew he had to stop William. He traveled to Salisbury in person, hoping to lift his army's morale. He believed that if his soldiers saw their king ready to fight beside them, they would renew their oaths of allegiance. But when James reached the camp, cheers were nowhere to be found. Only betrayal awaited him. More and more troops abandoned his standard and joined the enemy. On that day, James lost all hope. Legend says overwhelming stress made his nose bleed. Shortly afterwards, the English king fled hastily back to London. Weeks later, he escaped the country entirely. A man who wore a crown had lost his kingdom. History usually tells us this. The men who shaped England's fate were James II and William of Orange. One defeated, one victorious. But behind this revolution that redefined Britain's future stood another man. He commanded no army, he held no earthly crown. His kingdom existed nowhere in the real world. Yet he firmly believed he was the one chosen by destiny to rule. His name was Goodwin Wharton. If you visit the British Library in London, you can still find a strange manuscript. It stretches to 500,000 words written by Goodwin Wharton himself. Inside this unpublished memoir, he recounts a second life. He claimed that from 1684 until his death in 1704, he ruled a secret realm, the world of the fairies. It sounds like a fairy tale, but Goodwin Wharton was a real person. He was no mythical sprite, he was a genuine aristocrat of 17th century England. His father, Philip Wharton, owned vast lands. The Wharton family produced generations of barons, knights, and politicians. His elder brother Thomas was an influential figure in Parliament. Thomas belonged to the Whig Party and opposed growing Catholic power. England was torn by severe political crisis. Many feared that if the Catholic James inherited the throne, England would return to Catholic rule. Thomas took part in plots to block James's ascent to power. Goodwin, too, hungered to prove his worth. In 1680, at the age of 27, Goodwin became a member of Parliament. This was his chance to change his fate, yet he chose radical tactics. In speeches before Parliament, he openly attacked James, calling him a foolish coward. He even accused him of absurd crimes, including setting the Great Fire of London. His words shocked everyone and embarrassed his whole family. His father and brother believed politics demanded patience and careful strategy. Goodwin thought only by drawing all eyes to himself could he prove his value. In the end, he never became the statesman his family expected. Instead, he became a man endlessly chasing new paths. After stepping back from mainstream politics, Goodwin tried his hand at invention. He designed firefighting equipment, hoping to change the world through technology. The project collapsed amid patent disputes. Later, he grew obsessed with deep-sea exploration. 17th century humanity knew almost nothing about the ocean depths. There was no modern diving gear, no understanding of decompression sickness. Still, Goodwin planned to build diving equipment to hunt for a sunken Spanish treasure ship off Scotland's coast. He found no treasure. Next, he turned to alchemy. He was convinced base metals could be turned into gold with the right methods. He hired professional alchemists and poured funding into countless experiments. No gold ever appeared. In cruel irony, the alchemist burned down Goodwin's house and fled. Failure followed failure. In the real world, Goodwin was losing everything. Then, in 1683, a woman altered the course of his life, her name, Mary Parish. Mary was 20 years older than Goodwin. She worked as a healer, and she was fascinated by all supernatural lore. She told Goodwin the world was far more mysterious than ordinary people imagined. When she was young, her grandfather told her he had discovered fairy gold while digging in the woods. Years later, Mary claimed she had seen fairies with her own eyes. She said the fairies possessed their own kingdom. They mastered shrinking magic and invisibility. Vast treasures lay buried beneath the earth. Goodwin was utterly captivated. He believed Mary possessed special powers, held back only by hardship. The two formed a partnership. Mary would seek supernatural forces, and Goodwin would supply the money. Together, they set out to find fairyland. Mary told Goodwin a gateway to the fairy kingdom lay near Hounslow Heath. She had once followed the sound of church bells underground, where she met the fairy king and queen. The fairies had lived for thousands of years and owned endless gold. Goodwin believed he had finally found his opportunity. While waiting to meet the fairy queen, he and Mary ventured repeatedly into the forest to search for treasure. They found wealth buried underground, guarded by 3 invisible demons. The pair fought these spirits and finally defeated them. A benevolent spirit appeared and told them the treasure was theirs to take. But transporting the gold required hiring fairy servants who demanded payment in real money. Goodwin paid the sum. Days afterwards, news arrived: the treasure had vanished. The spirit explained that such disappearances happened all the time. You might ask, did Goodwin truly believe all these stories? The answer is more complicated than you think. He certainly had doubts. The fairy queen postponed their meeting again and again. Treasure kept vanishing for absurd reasons. But what if every word was true? What if he really could become king of another world? For a man who spent his whole life feeling underestimated, this temptation was overwhelming. Soon after, Mary brought fresh news. The fairy queen had fallen in love with Goodwin. She intended to crown him the new king of fairyland. She was even carrying his child, conceived during secret nightly visits he could not remember. Goodwin's mind drifted further into this alternate reality. Before long, he believed he had encountered an even greater power: angels. He claimed he saw angels appear in enchanted glasses of water. At first, the angels spoke only to Mary. Then they began addressing him directly. The angels told him not to grieve his failure to stop James from claiming the throne. He should not dwell on past defeats. His destiny was far greater than ordinary men. He was not merely the family's second choice, not just a failed MP. He was a man chosen by God. Someday, he would become one of the greatest rulers on earth. As time passed, Goodwin grew certain he carried a higher mission than the King of England. He even argued that James too could never father a legitimate heir, because the throne belonged to Goodwin's own bloodline. Reality quickly shattered this fantasy. James and his queen welcomed a baby son. This became James's biggest political crisis. A Catholic prince meant a lasting Catholic dynasty, and England's opposition resolved to act. William of Orange landed. The glorious revolution began. James lost his crown. At this moment, Goodwin thought he saw an opening. He reached out to James with an offer of help. He claimed he could summon aid from the fairy kingdom and restore the king's power. James never replied. To Goodwin, this proved James was crippled by pride. He had rejected the only chance to save his crown. In the end, William became England's new king. Goodwin's brother Thomas rose into the new ruling circle. Goodwin himself regained political office. He returned to Parliament, served as a cavalry officer and a commissioner of the Admiralty. To everyone around him, he had finally succeeded. He had wealth, status, and influence. No one knew, however, that in his own mind, he bore another title: King of the Fairies, the Solar King chosen by God. 2 separate worlds existed side by side inside his head. Goodwin Wharton's life leaves us with a haunting question. Was he simply a liar, a madman, or someone unable to accept the limits of reality? The truth may not be so simple. In the 17th century, a person's identity was not defined only by how others saw them. Sometimes people build an entire world and come to believe it is more real than the one outside. Goodwin never ruled England. He never became monarch of the whole world. No one ever found his fairy kingdom. Yet for the final decades of his life, he possessed something countless people chase forever: the conviction that he was destined for greatness. And that, perhaps, stands as his greatest tragedy. Some people lose their crowns because they never held one. Others lose their crowns because they spend their lives reigning over a kingdom only they can see.